Today we're going to be learning Beitzah Daf Tetzayin. This is the daf for Yom Kippur. Today's daf is sponsored by Gita Neufeld in loving memory of our honorary Zaidi, Marvin Stoker, Meir ben Aryeh Leib Halevi Alav Shalom. Zaidi Marvin's delight in Torah learning, and particularly the daf Yomi, still resonate. May he be a Melitz Yosher for our cherished Babi Fran and his entire family. We miss him so much. Okay, today is the daf for Yom Kippur, as I mentioned. And what's interesting about it is the way the daf starts. So we started yesterday the issue of Eruv Tafshilin. And from here, the Gemara gets off and says, Tani Rav Tachlifa, because the topic really is preparing food for the Chag. Rav Tachlifa Achua de Rabbanit Chosa'ah, the brother of Rabbanit Chosa'ah, said, Kol mezonotav shel adam ksuvim lo merosh Hashanah va'ad Yom Kippurim. How much food a person is going to have is all predetermined, okay? It gets determined when? Between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Okay, some people don't have the words Ad Yom Kippur, okay, either from Rosh Hashanah, but the idea being basically the first 10 days of the year, Aseret Yimei Teshuvah, which we just went through, are all that everything becomes determined there, how much food and what kind of parnasa you're going to have for the year. Chutz mi, except for the following things. Hotza'at Shabbatot hotza'at Shabbatot v'hotza'at Yom Tov, v'hotza'at banav l'Talmud Torah. Other than the amount of money you spend on food for Shabbat and Yom Tov, and for your children to learn, okay, for all those who struggle with the high tuition costs, She'im pachat pochatin lo, v'mosif mosifin lo. If you use not a lot of money, then God will reduce the amount that you get. And if you spend a lot of money on these things, then God will add to what you're supposed to get. So basically, we have this concept of how much you're supposed to get, but then there are certain adjustments that are made based on how you spend your money during the year. Some people say that this, by the way, affects mitzvot as well, not just the following things that are listed here, but any mitzvah, right? As we're coming up on the Sukkot, how much money people spend on your sukkah, or how much you spend, which kind of lulav do you buy, which kind of arba minim do you buy, the fancy kind, the better kind, the less good kind. But then they say, why are people spending crazy amount of money on this? But what this is basically saying is, these are the things that you should be spending your money on. This is where your priorities should be, and this is where you should be spending your money. Now, we all know that some people spend a lot of money on this, and it doesn't necessarily come back to them, and that's a whole separate question. But again, it relates to, this is the tactics the rabbis used for encouraging people to do things that were challenging for them and difficult for them, but saying, listen, right, there's a payback. And whether it's payback in this world or in the next world is also, this seems to say in this world, but maybe the payback's in the next world. So in any case, this is something that you probably have heard before, familiar with. Anyway, let's keep going. So Daf Mishalahem this week dealt with this statement and a bunch of other things connected. Amar Rabbi Abau, where did we get this from? How do we know it's on Rosh Hashanah that your food is determined for the year? Tik'u b'chodesh shofar b'kesel yom chagenu. This is from a parak in Tehillim. Blow the shofar on the day on the keset, which we'll explain in a minute, liyom chagenu, to the day of our holiday, b'keset. So what is b'keset? Ezehu chag shachodesh mitkasebo. In what holiday? It says tik'u b'chodesh, in the month. Which month? The month of b'keset, b'yom chagenu, where the holiday is covered, meaning the moon is covered on the holiday. When is that? Rosh Hashanah, first day of the year, which is the new moon. So you can't see the moon then. So what is that? Hevei Omer is Rosh Hashanah. So that pasuk must be referring to Rosh Hashanah, which we know because we always quote it on Rosh Hashanah. And Uchtiv, the next pasuk says, Ki chok liYisrael hu mishpat Elohei Yaakov, because the chok is for Yisrael. The chok is generally the law, and mishpat for the Elohim of Yisrael. But what we're saying is, chok is food, and the food is liYisrael. The food gets determined for the Jewish people on that day. My mashma d'hai chok lishana de mezonehi. How do we know that chok means food? Dichtiv, v'achlu et chukam asher natan lehem Paro. We're going to have two verses. One is they ate the chukam that Paro gave them. That means food. And marzutra mar mehacha hatrifeni lechem chuki. Give me my portion. Right, where there chok really means portion, but it means portion of food. Tanya. Amru alav al Shammai HaZaken. There's another famous line. It's known about Shammai the elder, right? The ones who Beit Shammai came from. Those are the house of Shammai HaZaken, his students. Kol Yamav, what was known about Shammai himself? Kol Yamav hayauchel lechvod Shabbat. Every day he would eat in honor of Shabbat. What does that mean? Matzah behema na'a omer zol Shabbat. He would find a great animal. He'd say, I'm going to save that animal for Shabbat. Matzah acheret na'eh himena. He found a better one. He would say, so then he set aside the second one and he ate the first one and he would save the second one then for Shabbat. So we kept doing this, right? This is obviously, he saved the animal before he slaughtered it. Once he slaughtered it, we've already discussed without refrigeration, it would be impossible to save food for all week long. But here we mean are the raw materials for the food. He found a good animal. He said, I'm saving that animal to slaughter just before Shabbat. But Aval Hillel has a kain mida acheret haytalo. Hillel had a totally different attitude. Shekol ma'asav l'shem shamayim. Everything he did was for the sake of God. Meaning, Rashi says, what does it mean l'shem shamayim? Boteach. Shetizamei lo na'el Shabbat. He had belief in God that if he found something good today and it's only Sunday or Monday or Tuesday, he'll find something better later in the week. So he would find something good. He would eat it right then. He wouldn't start putting it aside and saving it. He said, by Shabbat, I'm sure I'll find something else good. Shenemar Baruch Hashem Yom Yom. We've used this verse for other things, but here it means blessed is God every day, that God blesses us on a daily basis. So if he gives us something today, I'm sure he'll give us something else tomorrow. Tanya Namihach, here's another Beitzah that says exactly the same thing. Beit Shammai Omrim, Mechad Shabecha L'Shabtecha. It's from one week to another, save your stuff from what you find till the Shabbat. Beit Hillel Omrim, Baruch Hashem Yom Yom. Eat it that day and trust in God that he'll give you something else for later. Am Rabbi Chama b'Rabbi Chanina. Hanotem matana lechavero ein tzarich lehodio. This we'll see connects back to Shabbat. If you give a friend a gift, you don't need to tell him. Okay, you can be secretive about it. That's fine. You don't need to tell your friend. Shenemar, how do we know this? Umoshe lo yada ki karan or panav. Moshe didn't know that his face was glowing. God gave him this gift that his face was going to glow, but he didn't even know. So there you see, you don't have to tell. See, from God, we learn from the midot of God. God didn't tell Moshe. Likewise, we don't have to tell other people. You can give a gift in secret. It's kind of nice. They don't always need to know. Meitive, but wait, it's a contradictory source. Beitzah says, Ladat ki anei Hashem makadishchem. This is a pasuk that talks about in Sefer Shemot, Perek Lamed Aleph. It talks about keep Shabbat. And then it says, because it's a sign between you and me for future generations, Ladat, so they will know that I am the God that sanctified you. Ladat means to know. But if you take ladad and you change the form of the word, it also means lahodia, to let others know. And that's how this drasha is going to work. Amar lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu Moshe. God said to Moshe, Moshe, matana tova yesh li bebeit genazai v'shabbat shma. I have a gift stored up in my storage house. It's called Shabbat. V'ani mevakesh litna liYisrael, and I want to give it to the Jewish people. Lech v'hodia otam. Go tell them. Mikan Amar Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. From here, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel derived, and this is going to be the contradiction. Hanotem pat letinok tzarich lodia liimo. If you give bread to a child, you have to somehow, we'll see later how you do this, you send some sort of marker on it so that the mother starts to ask, and it will become clear to the mother that you're the one that you gave a child a gift. Normally, you give a child a gift, the child won't necessarily tell the parent. So you have to do something so that the parent will realize there's something to ask, right? Often you ask your kids, how was your day? What happened in school? And you get blank face, right? Nothing, fine, nothing, everything's fine, nothing, no, nothing really happened. School was bad, school was good, whatever. You don't really get details. But if you know something, like the teacher writes to you, writes to the WhatsApp group of the class, we did this today, then you can start asking your child about it and you'll get a better answer. So that's what we're going to see here. Now, what's the point? Why does the mother need to know? So Rashi says it's very important to know if you got a gift because I'm looking at the end of the Rashi. They'll know that this guy likes them, loves them. And it will perpetuate friendship and love between fellow Jews. That's a value. Or to get that value going, you have to tell people you give them gifts, and people will love you more because it's not that you give a gift so that someone loves you, but you give a gift to people you love, and then that just perpetuates the relationship. So here, what do you see? You saw that it says, Rabbi Bar Chanina said you don't need to tell them. And then here it seems to say you do. So what's the story? If the gift is going to eventually be revealed, like Moshe's face was shining, he didn't know, but eventually someone was going to tell him and he was going to find out. then you don't need to say, because eventually you'll figure it out, and then you'll figure out where it came from. But in a gift that is never going to be revealed, like Shabbat, let's say, although we're going to ask about that in a minute, or like this bread that you give a child that maybe no one will ever find out, then you have a mitzvah to tell them, or you should tell them. Shabbat nami matana David legaluya. What do you mean Shabbat? No one's going to know about it. Of course, they were going to eventually know that they received Shabbat. Of course, it was going to be revealed eventually. So matan schara lo avidei legaluya. The fact that you get a reward for it, that was something Moshe needed to tell them, because they wouldn't know that otherwise. Amar Mar, let's go back to a statement we said before about the child. If you give bread to a child, you have to tell his mother. My avidle, so what do? You put some cream on the child, and you put some blue like eyeshadow on the child. You paint his face. When he comes home with a painted face, you say, who painted your face? And then you say, oh, this guy gave me bread. And then, tells the guy's name, and then the mother knows that, right? And he also gave me some bread. Then you'll find out. But here comes first of all, the whole thing is just strange, right? You think about kids sometimes come home from from kindergarten with their faces painted. Say, oh, what happened today? Why did they paint your faces? So it's like that. But now the Gemara says, but people are worried about witchcraft nowadays, and sometimes they would put, I guess, blue eyeshadow on your face or something, and that was a sign that a witch had been there. Then you get your mother all worried. We certainly don't want that. So Amar Papa, shayif le'me'oto hamid. What do? You smear on the kid's face what he was eating. Like if he was eating the bread with cheese, then you smear cheese on the face, or whatever it might be. You kind of let the food go on his face, and then he'll come in with a dirty face, and then the mother will ask, oh, what did you eat? And then and where did you get it from? And then she'll figure out. Everything was given to them in public, meaning everyone else knew about it. How do we know this? Shabbat was given privately to the Jewish people without anyone seeing. It says, it's between me and the Jewish people. It's a sign forever. That means it's just between us. Nobody else really knows that. This was also in that same chapter in Shemot, a few psukim later. So now the Gemara says, but then the Gentiles shouldn't get punished because they didn't keep Shabbat. And there's a Gemara that talks about that the Gentiles didn't do Shabbat. And because of that, they knew about Shabbat and they decided not to keep it. And because of that, they're punished because they didn't decide to take the Torah upon themselves. So how could you explain that? Shabbat odue odinu. They really didn't know about the existence of Shabbat, but matan schara lo odinu. But they didn't know about the reward of Shabbat. Some people say matan schara nami odinu. They really did know about the reward of Shabbat. Neshama yetera lo odinu. But they didn't know about this neshama yetera that comes with Shabbat. Okay, what that is? Right, you get an extra soul on Shabbat. Talk about this in a minute. As the Gemara says, the Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, Neshama Yetera Noten Lo Kadosh Baruch Hu Ba'Adam Erev Shabbat. You get this extra soul. U'Motzei Shabbat Notzlin Ota Himenu. On Motzei Shabbat, it gets taken away from you. Shene'emar Shabbat Vayi Nafash. Kevan sheShabbat Vayi Avda Nefesh. And once the Shabbat is over, Vayi Nafash is Vayi Nefesh. Oy vey, like I'm so sad that my extra nefesh has left me. Okay, what exactly is Neshama Yetera? You can look up different commentaries. There's a bunch of different explanations given about it. But I always think of that feeling, that sinking feeling you have when Shabbat ends and you realize I'm going back to my rigmarole of my weekly routine and my work and everything else, right? Shabbat has that, it's kind of everything was removed from you on Shabbat. And then, after Shabbat, you feel that sadness that you lost that what Shabbat gave you. So, okay, we'll move on. Oseh Adam Tafshil Me'erev Yom Tov, because it's Yom Kippur, the daf for Yom Kippur. I'm trying to go quickly to be able to have you catch up quicker. Oseh Adam Tafshil Me'erev Yom Tov. So now we're back to the Erev Tafshil. So we got off on the sidetrack about the food that you get, right? The food you make on Shabbat and how it affects your income, and about how you choose which food you leave for Shabbat, Shammai Hillel. And then about giving gifts and the special gift of Shabbat and the Neshama Yetera and okay. So now, you make a tafshil Erev Yom Tov. This is what we call Erev Tafshilim. Amar Abai lo shanu ela tafshil of a patlo. It has to be a cooked dish, not bread. Why not? Ma'ishna patlo. Why not bread? By the way, we use bread and a cooked dish. What it means is it's not only bread. Mashna patila, why not? Maybe you need something that goes with the bread, and you don't have bread with bread. Generally, they didn't eat bread plain. They always ate bread with something. Also, porridge is not something that you eat with bread. And how do we know you don't eat it with bread? Because Rabbi Zera said, those silly Babylonians, look at their eating habits. They eat bread with bread, meaning they eat bread with porridge, and that's gross. Like, who eats carbs with carbs? We eat bread with something that goes with bread, like a spread, not with porridge. And what does this have to do with anything? It says you can use daisa for your eruv. Okay, that's what Rav Nechumi said. So because of that, it seems that it doesn't have to be something that goes with bread, because we proved porridge doesn't go with bread, and you can use porridge, so it must not be. So they say, Elamidi de lo shachiach bin, and it must be you need something that's atypical, because if it's typical, it won't be clear that you're doing it for your eruv. So you need something atypical so that it's obvious you're using it for your eruv tafshilin. And pat shchicha v'had upat shchicha v'daisa lo shchicha. Right, pat is often used, and porridge is less common. But this whole sugya is also told in a different version, which some of it is the same and some of it is the opposite. Some people say this starts off the same. Amar Abai lo shanu ela tafshil aval pat lo. You can use a cooked dish, but not bread. My time. Well, what's the reason? Now here it starts from the end there. If it's because you need pot is common and you need something not very common, daisa lo shchicha. Daisa is not very common, porridge. V'amar Rav Nechumi bar Zachariah mishmei Abai. Here it's going to be the opposite of what he said in the first version. Ein ma'arvin b'daisa. You can't use it, and that's atypical, so it can't be that that's the issue. And you must need something that goes together with bread, and that's why porridge can't be used, as we know, because upat lo melafta v'daisa nami lo melafta, as bread doesn't, and also porridge doesn't, as we know. The Amar Rabbi Zera, hani b'vai tipshai de'achle nahama b'nahama, because those stupid Babylonians who eat bread with bread. Tani Rabbi Chia, right? This is another. I don't have time, but another sugya where we have people from Israel ranking on the Babylonians. Sometimes it's because of their strange eating habits, right? Which is typical. People in different places eat different kinds of foods, and they're surprised by other people who eat differently than they do. Tani Rabbi Chia. Rabbi Chia brought a Beitzah that said, Adashim shebeshulei ktera somech alehem mishumei ruvei tavshilin. If you have lentils that are stuck at the bottom of the pot and you scrape them up, you can rely on that for your eruv. Now, this means better not to, but you can if you have nothing else. But only if they have a kazayit, an olive bulk, otherwise it's not enough. Similar thing. The fat that's on your knife, you can take off the knife and eat it, right? Those are people used to eat, right? Chicken fat and things like that. So eat it as a dish. Right, nowadays, much fewer people do that. But assuming you could do that, you can use it for your eruv. Again, you have to have a requisite amount of an olive bulk. If you have little salted fish, it's not a problem. We're moving topics now, although we'll get back in a minute. A Gentile is not allowed to cook for you because we're worried that you'll end up eventually, if you eat a lot of food together, they cook for you, you'll end up potentially intermarrying. So because of that, they forbid foods that they cooked for you, however, or cooked for themselves. However, if it's food that can be eaten raw, then it's not considered cooking when they cook it for you. So if these small fish that they would salt could be eaten raw, so therefore, if a Gentile cooks them for you, it's not a problem of bishul akum, you can eat it. Comes Rav Yosef and he says, if he roasted them, you can even use it for eruv tavshilin. In other words, it's considered cooked for the purposes of eruv tavshilin, but it's not a problem of bishul akum. So it comes funny. You can actually use something a Gentile cooked for you as your eruv tavshilin. Plus, you can obviously eat it. But if he made kasa deharsana, which was a fish that they would fry in, they would coat with flour and fry it, asur. Why is it asur? Because you don't eat flour raw, so you wouldn't eat that raw. Pshita, the Gemara says, obviously, you wouldn't eat it raw. So, ma'u detema harsana ikal kamashman kimcha ikal. whenever you have something coated with flour or breadcrumbs, you don't know, the breadcrumbs the main part, or is it the fish, right? Let's say schnitzel. Do you make a mizonot or do you make a shakol? There actually is a debate among the commentary, the poskim about this. So it depends on what you look at. Do you look at the breadcrumbs as being the ikar, or the main part, or the meat itself? So they say here that according to this sugya, the kemach is what's more important, and that's the part that's raw. So therefore, it's something you wouldn't eat. Right? This reminds me of many, many years ago. Some friends of mine and I decided to do when I was about 20, a party in Aramaic, like foods of the Gemara, and we made all these random foods. We tried to make dishes that were, foods that you would find in the Gemara. I don't remember if we made kasa de hartzana, but we would see the kind of thing that you would try to make at home. Amar Rabbi Abba. You have to have a kizayit of food in your erev tafshilin. Does that mean you need a kizayit for one kizayit for all the people you're including in your erev, or do you need a kizayit for each person that you're including in your erev tafshilin? Tashma, let's learn from here. To Amar Rabbi Abba Amar Rav, the same person, he said in the name of Rav, there he says it very clearly, whether it's for one person or whether it's for 100. Tanan. Now we're going to bring a question on Rabbi Abba, who said that you need a kizayit. Look at our Mishnah. It says, achalo o she'avad, if you ate it or it got lost. Lo yivashel alav b'tchila, you can't start cooking on Yantif for Shabbos if you lost your eruv. But shiur mimenu koshu, if a little bit was left, samech alav l'Shabbat, then you can rely on it to cook. My lav koshu. What does koshu usually mean? Lav afagav deleka kizayit. Doesn't it mean just any little bit is left, even if it's not an olive bulk? Lo de'ipe kizayit. No, when it means koshu here, it means as long as you have a little bit left, meaning at least a kizayit. Okay, it doesn't really prove anything about the size. Tashma. Let's read from this source. Tafshil zet sali afilu kavush shaluku bivushal. Okay, these are all different ways: roasting, cooking, pickling, slow cooking, long cooking, or even this fish. It was this fish, a Spanish fish, that they would just throw boiling water on it. As long as you made that before Yom Tov, in other words, all those types of cooking can be used, different methods, could be used to be considered a tafshil for the purposes of erev tafshilin. As long, and it says from the start or from whatever's left, safo, ein lo shiur, there's no requisite amount. My lav ein lo shiur klal. Doesn't it sound like it means it doesn't have any requisite amount, which would go against Rabbi Abba, who says it needs to be an olive bulk? To which they answer, lo, ein lo shiur l'ma, lava yesh lo shiur l'mat. It doesn't have any maximum, but it does have a minimum. Minimally, you need a kazayit. It doesn't have a maximum. What does it mean it doesn't have a maximum? What? Of course, you can make as much as you want. So some people explain what it means it doesn't have a maximum is it doesn't have a maximum of how many people this can cover. Other people say it doesn't have a maximum about how much food you can cook from one eruv. In other words, one eruv either covers as many people as you want, or it also could potentially cover as many foods as you want to make on Yantif for Shabbat. Amarav Huna Amarav. Next halacha. Eruvei tavshilin tzruchim da'at. You need knowledge, intent. What does this mean? Who? Pshita da'at meniach binan. Obviously, the person who makes the eruv needs an intent. If you didn't have intent, you just made some food. Of course, it's not an eruv. But da'at mishinichu lo be'inan or lo be'inan. The person, let's say I make an eruv and I have in mind a bunch of other people. Does that cover them or not? Or do they have to know? It's a bit of a strange question because normally we say in halacha, zachin la'adam shelo b'fanav. You can always do something good for someone, even if he doesn't know about it. But in any case, they ask the question, but we'll see that the answer is going to be no, they don't. Tashma, let's learn from here. Ta'avua de Shmuel, Shmuel's father, Ma'arev akula nahardea. He would do it for the whole city, and not all of them necessarily knew that he was doing it for them. Rabbi Ami for Rabbi Asi, Ma'arvu akulu Tveria. Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Asi would do it for all of the Tveria inhabitants, Tiberias. Machriz Rabbi Yaakov bar Idi, he would announce, anyone who didn't do it can rely on mine. So you see all these instances where they did it, even though the people didn't know. Va'ad kama, how far, right? Can I make an eruv for my parents? I'm in Israel and my parents are abroad. Can I make an eruv and have intent for them? Just until the Tchum Shabbat, 2,000 cubits outside the city. So obviously, no, I can't do it for my parents. How was Samya? Now we're going to have a story, an interesting story. There was a blind person. To have a Masader Matnite Kametim Shmuel. I guess his memory was good. And he would bring Breitot in front of Shmuel. He couldn't read, but obviously he would memorize Breitot. And he brought a Breitot in front of Shmuel. Shmuel saw him one day, he was sad. Amar le, amay atziva. He said, what are you so sad about? Amar le, delo tive eruv tafshilin. I didn't do an eruv tafshilin. I forgot. Amar le, smocha didi. He said, no problem, just rely on mine. Okay, sounds like a pretty simple story, but the story gets a little more complicated. Lishana, the next year, chazi dava atziv. He gets into a similar situation. He sees the guy very sad. Amar le, amay atziva. He says, what are you so sad? Amarle, delo tive eruv tafshilin, eruv tafshilin. I forgot to make an eruv tafshilin. Amarle, posheat. His reaction now, the second time, he says, wow, you're a bad guy. Okay, you're negligent, right? You didn't do it twice, and it's one time, okay, but twice. Lekule al mashale ledidach asur. Everyone else is allowed to do this. For you, it's forbidden. That's everyone else can rely on my eruv, but I'm not including you. You were not included in my eruv because you were negligent. First of all, it's a little bit strange. He included everyone in the eruv when he originally did it. So how could he disinclude him at this point? Some people say it's not really halachic. He was trying to be punitive about it, right? And he was upset with him. Some people say that maybe by the fact that he didn't say, oh, can I rely, right? What should he have said? Can I rely on your eruv again? Because I forgot. Shouldn't have been sad. The fact that he was sad maybe indicates he didn't want to rely on Shmuel's eruv. And then it's not like having no intent. It's like having negative intent, where he didn't want to. And that's why Shmuel is maybe saying, you can't fulfill your obligation with mine. Anyway, there's different ways to understand this. Next. Tanu Rabbanan. Yom Tov shechal liyot be'erev Shabbat. Last topic for today. If Yom Tov falls out on Erev Shabbat, ein ma'arvin lo eruvei tchumim v'lo eruvei chatzerot. You can't, let's say you forgot to make an erev chatzerot or an erev tchumen for Shabbat, or erev tchumen you would also need for Yantif. You didn't do it. Can you do it on Yantif for Shabbat? So Tanakama says no, neither one. It doesn't talk about erev tafshilin, but presumably it would be the same as erev chatzerot. We'll see why in a minute. Rabbi Omer, ma'avim eruvei chatzerot, but lo eruvei tchumin. You can do an erev chatzerot to allow carrying on Shabbos, but you can't do an erev tchumen to allow you to walk more than 2,000 cubits outside the city. Why? You can do something on Yantif to permit something that's permitted today. You're allowed to carry on Yantif. Likewise, you're allowed to cook on Yantif. So to do something that's permitted, you can do. But you can't make an erev tchumen because you're not allowed to walk outside the tchum on Yantif either. So you can't do that on Yom Tov. The question is, why does Tanakama think it's forbidden? So the question is, so there's a few different explanations given in the commentaries. One is to say that it's a hachana problem. You're preparing from Yom Tov to Shabbat, which we've learned already. You're not allowed to prepare something on Yom Tov for Shabbat, even if you could do it on Yom Tov. Right? That's the whole reason why we need erev tchumen, because you can't an erev tafshilin, because you can't cook, even though you're allowed to cook on Yom Tov. You can't cook on Yom Tov for Shabbat because it's preparation. Only the erev allows you to do that. Second option is it's like you're fixing something, just like you can't take truma to maslo because it's fixing. Also here you're like fixing. And the third is that an erev chatzerot is you're basically transferring ownership. You're saying we're all co-owners. That you can't do on Yantif. You're not allowed to transfer ownership. So it's possibly other halachic issues involved here. But Rebbe seems to think it's okay to do the erev chatzerot, and presumably he would say the erev tafshilin, even though it doesn't say it. So now the question is, how do we hold? Itmar. Rav Amar halacha ketanakama, Shmuel Amar halacha keRebbe. Right, so Rav is strict and Shmuel is lenient. So the Gemara says, Ibaya lehu halacha keRebbe. When Shmuel says halacha keRebbe, lekula or lechumra, is he being lenient or strict? That's a strange question, because Rebbe was clearly lenient. He said you can make an erev chatzerot on Yantif for Shabbat. So pshita de lekula ka'amar. So they say, right? Obviously he's being lenient. So why are you even asking? They say, well, Mishum Deshalach Rabbi Elazar Lagola. Rabbi Elazar sent to Bavel. Lo kshatem shonim beBavel, Rebbe matir v'chachamim osrim. You guys in Bavel think that Rebbe was the one who allowed it, and Chachamim did not. No, you have it all wrong. Ela Rebbe oser v'chachamim osrim. Rebbe forbids, and the rabbis permit. So now the question is, when Shmuel said it, which version was he holding by? The version that Rebbe's strict or lenient? So what's the situation? Tashma, let's learn from here. Rav Tachlifa bar of Dimi, Avid Uvda Kavatei de Shmuel. Rav Tachlifa did something like Shmuel. And Amarav, in other words, again, we don't know what Shmuel said, but he did whatever Shmuel said, either like Rebbe, Lekula, lenient, yes, you can make an erev, or no, you can't. But Amarav, and Rav's reaction to that was, the first psak that this rabbi gave is going to is just going to mess people up. Now, what does it mean to mess people up? So Iyamar Bishlamad Lakula Ka'amar Hainu Kula. Remember, Rav Paskin like the rabbis. So if you want to say that he said, oh, he allowed people to do an Erev Chatzerot, and Rav says you're not allowed to. So that would make sense. Then he's saying that was your mess up. You're permitting people to do things it's actually forbidden. But if Rebbe is more strict, that he doesn't allow you to make an Erev Chatzerot, Michael Kulaika, what kind of mess up could that cause people to do, right? He's just being more strict. Or strict is always better. Well, maybe not. So now the Gemara says, no, not necessarily. To not permit people to do an Erev Chatzerot is going to cause a kilkula on Shabbat, because then all these people are going to carry even though they don't have an Erev Chatzerot. So sometimes being machmir and not allowing things is actually causing more people to mess up. And therefore, he says, and we've seen this before, right, where chumrah da'ati lidei kula, right, that a chumrah is going to cause people actually to mess things up. So, right, which we know to be the case. And therefore, it's possible. We don't have a good indication here what actually Shmuel thought that Rebbe held when he paskin like him. So Amarava, here's the bottom line of the sugya. We'll just finish with this. Amarava, Amarav Chista, Amarav Huna, Halacha ki Rebbe uli isur. We actually pass on like Rebbe and the Chumra way. He specifically, Rebbe was the one who said you can't do an Erev Chatzerot on Yantiv that falls on Erev Shabbat. With that, we finish for today. Gemar Chatima Tova to everyone, Shana Tova, and we'll pick up after Yom Kippur.